Hey, it's Bear. Everyone's wondering who to invest in Wuthering Waves, which characters are best in the 1.0 release. So today I wanted to make a fast video going over all the characters, all the Resonators in Wuthering Waves, going over their strengths and weaknesses, what role they go into, and fit them into a tier list so you have a better understanding of what's available in the game right now. Now, I don't want this video to be too long, so I'm not going to go over rotations and gameplay and specifics about putting the characters together. I'm just talking about the characters one by one and put them in their roles. If you didn't know, and I'll break this out into a separate video, there are 3 characters you can fit into your party, into your team, 3 Resonators that go into it. And the general strategy for this is to have a main DPS, a Resonator that does exceptional damage, usually one that relies on being on the field for a long time, so high uptime, characters that need to do a lot of channeling or attacking or heavy attacking or basic attacking, that have a lot of time on the field that you will then support with other characters that can bolster their strengths. Then you have what I call synergy, but you'll probably hear other people call a sub DPS, though not all of them are actually going to be sub DPS. And these are a secondary character that you add into your party that will usually buff the main character. So they have some kind of synergistic buff, either with their main ultimate ability or with their outro intro skill that they can use to make your main DPS even stronger. So if you have a character that focuses on basic attacks, you would want to use like Sanhua, for example, since she buffs basic attack bonuses. You may want to use Mortefi on characters that use heavy attack, because when he does an outro skill, he makes that next character do more with heavy attacks, that sort of thing. Some of the synergy characters can actually stay on the field for longer and do DPS. They're not going to be as good as your main DPS, but they still will be able to hold their own if you're in a situation where a character dies or you have to do damage with a different character. Then you have support, which do a similar role, but then they have other things going on. They can have synergies as part of their focus, but generally you use them for shielding, healing, buffing, that sort of thing. So you bring them out when you need to keep your characters alive, though a lot of the end game, like tower diversity in Wuthering Waves, does a ton of damage. So let's go through starting from left to right on the screen, and we'll figure out where the characters land. Starting with main DPS, the best DPS in the game right now, and it's not even close, is going to be Jiyan. Jiyan is absolutely ridiculous. Now, it's kind of the thing in gacha RPGs to take the character that is in the limited banner and make them the best. It's possible he'll get adjustments over time, but as it stands right now, he's about 3 times better than the other options in the game for DPS output when fully maxed out. So we're talking about S6. The DPS output that he has is ridiculous. He also is good in almost all situations. He has incredibly good grouping. When he pops his ultimate, all of his attacks have vortex properties attached to them, so he can gather enemies up. He has great single target. He can practically solo bosses by himself. So if you're thinking about whether you want to get the banner and you're wanting to use, like, you don't have a surefire main DPS in mind, you may want to look at picking up Jiyan as fast as you can. Going into the A tier, just below Jiyan. So Jiyan, he's simulating at around 60,000 DPS right now. So in the 30,000s right now are 2 characters that are also both 5 stars, and that is going to be Calcharo and Encore, with Encore being slightly ahead of Calcharo. They both have their faults on how they function. They're not as like Bandage can do everything as Jiyan. Encore does actually have a required animation cancel if you want to use her optimal DPS. So like towards the end of her combo, you have to quick swap to another Resonator and then swap back to stop a very long and very punishing animation that she has. So if you're okay with quick swapping or animation canceling, Encore is actually outperforming Calcharo right now. Just remember that if you want optimal, you know, if that's your thing, then we're going to have to focus on having that animation cancel as part of your strategy. And then Sephiroth or Calcharo is a great electro option, does tons of damage and synergizes really well. And I will mention that in general, this is going to be based on a optimal playstyle in the hardest content tier list. If you're someone who just likes to play the game for fun, you want to pick up the characters that you like, all characters, like all main DPS in this category, have cleared all the content in previous closed beta tests in China. So you can clear all the content with any main DPS that you choose. Just keep in mind that Jiyan can practically do it by himself, whereas some of the lower ones on the list may need the perfect team setup with the right synergies, the right buffs, proper animation canceling, and good gear and good echoes in order to do the same thing that Jiyan can do, but it doesn't mean that they can't do it at all. So if you're someone who's like really loves a character, don't worry if they're lower on the list. list, you can definitely make that work if you're interested. So since the two of these, Encore and Calcharo, are some of the best main DPS in the game, and they're also part of the novice beginner banner, if you are wondering what to spend your 5-star on and you don't have a good main DPS, Encore or Calcharo would be excellent choices for you, and you don't want to get them to higher level awakening unlocks to make them even stronger. But there is actually one 4-star in the game that does comparable DPS when perfectly played and executed, and that is going to be the main girl, Danjin. She is a Havoc character. She is incredibly difficult to play. She has a lot of animation cancels and swaps into longer bits, and she also is like a blood mage berserker style gameplay, which means that as she builds up her meter, she does it by sacrificing her HP. So she burns her HP, she'll spend it on a combo heavy attack, which will heal her back up. And you also, if you're going to be running her, you want to run her with like a Verina or a Baizhi so they can keep her alive, because she's going to be constantly dealing damage to herself. But if properly played with the right synergies, she can actually do some really respectable damage, and luckily she is only 4-star, which means she's much easier to gain access to. Next for DPS and B, I would actually put the two main characters, the Rovers. And I might say two because later on they start as a Spectro element, and later on you can unlock currently the Havoc element. And as far as the DPS output goes, the Havoc is slightly outperforming the Spectro, and they have really easy awakening unlocks. You can actually get them to like S2, S3, S4 very easily as part of the game progressing. So you can very easily make them quite strong, and they're one of the strongest DPS outputs in the very early games. You can actually run these as your main DPS. Say you pulled like a Verina for support, or you pulled like a Genshin for synergy or something, and you don't have a good DPS, you can actually just use Rover for the time being. They will get outscaled later, but as of right now, they're quite good, and the Havoc is slightly outperforming the Spectro, if that's something that you're looking for. Lastly, in the final tier, unfortunately, I'm gonna have to put Lingyang. He is a 5-star. He's part of the novice beginner banner, but he has a lot of downsides to him. Now, he is a super fun character to play and has a very unique playstyle. When he's in his lion striding state, he can actually just permanently stay in the air. So if you're like an insect glaive fan for Monster Hunter and you just want to be airborne all the time, you can actually just stay in the air for the duration of your meter. As long as you have lion meter, you can actually stay in the air the entire time. Some of the boss fights get a little weird because it makes it harder to parry, and it means you might get stuck on things, but he's very, very unique and very fun to play. It's just when played optimally, most if not all of his damage comes from basic attacks, and all of that damage usually comes when he's in that lion strider state, and so you really have to plan around that window, and even then, he's still about a third of the overall S6 maxed out damage that you'd get from Jiyan. So he is an option if you get him as your novice beginner banner, or you chose him with your free 5-star that came out today, then don't worry, he still is useful. His damage output is going to be noticeably lower than any of the others on this list. He's actually like maybe just like 5% less than a Danjin if played properly, but obviously he's a 5-star, so you're going to put more effort and resources into maxing him than you would a Danjin, which is 4-star and is a very easy pickup in the current limited banner with Jiyan as well. And lastly, in the main DPS, I fought with myself over this one because she's such a hard one to make work, but she is quite useful and effective if you can do her properly, and that is going to be the free character Chixia. She is a fusion character that uses pistols, and the major downside for her is that most of her damage comes from her channeled ability, where she sits there and just goes crazy with the pistols. The downside with that is because she's such a high uptime required character, it gets a little awkward to switch over to your other two Resonators to try and get buffs and bonuses, because you kind of want her on the field like 98% of the time. So you really need a good secondary synergy that can finish their rotation as fast as possible, and then a good support that you're just using for healing, and the rest of the time you're playing on Chixia. But if you have an account, like one of my rerolled accounts, I got S3 Chixia at the very, like as soon as I locked in convening, I got S3 Chixia, so that would be an option for using for main DPS. She does about the same, if not slightly less than like Lingyang or like B and C tier, if played perfectly, can all be put in the same grouping of how much damage they put out. It's just the C tier is separated just because there's more requirements and it's a little bit harder to get that damage output. So that is going to be the main DPS DPS, I would look for these characters as your main DPS when you're wondering what to play around that. But in general, I think these are your main DPS options for Wuthering Waves. Let's move on to synergy and how you're going to support these DPS characters in your party. Moving on to synergy or sub DPS, I fought with myself whether or not to include this one, but I think she's going to be so incredibly good at this role specifically that I did decide to include her, and that is going to be the next limited banner coming out on, I believe, June 12th. So in like 2 weeks, we will be getting Yinlin, and she is actually an insane electro synergy character. She actually works amazing. Like if you have a high S level on your Calcharo, you want to be saving up for Yinlin because they go so perfect. It's a match made in heaven. So the double electro as synergy for her. She does have good DPS, decent DPS, but she's very good at buffing electro characters and has that kind of combo synergy there. The next thing that we're going to look at here for the A tier, as this one is coming, it's going to be limited there, but I'm going to put 2 characters here in the A tier, and I would actually put them at about the same efficacy. They just do different things. So we're going to put Mortefi and Sanhua. Sanhua is one of the free characters that you get as your daily login, so make sure you're collecting her and getting her unlocked as well. But these are very, very good synergy. Sanhua actually has the fastest DPS rotation of any of the synergy characters. She can pop onto the field and be out in like 4 or 5 seconds. She can just pop all her abilities, get all her buffs up, get everything synergized and ready to go, and then you can swap back to your main DPS and be done with it. The main difference between these two here is going to be what you're trying to buff on your main DPS. Sanhua focuses primarily on buffing basic attack damage. So it works great with like a Jiyan because he has great, he has great everything. He has great ult damage, ability damage. He has great basic attack damage. So it doesn't really matter who you run with him as much, but you can run Sanhua if you want. But characters, remember we talked a lot about Lingyang being primarily basic attack. That means that the synergy you want to run with Lingyang is going to be Sanhua because not only does she have Glacio synergy with him, but also she's able to buff his basic attack damage with which during Lion Stride, when he's flying through the air and burning meter, almost all of his damage is basic attack damage, so Sanhua is great for that. Next is Mortefi, the lab guy that has the pistols, and he is an excellent sub DPS or synergy for characters that do heavy attacks. I actually play a lot of Danjin right now. This character I play the most, and most of her damage comes from her full meter heavy attack spam, and because of that, a great combo for her is going to be Mortefi, because when you outro skill away from Mortefi, your next character gets a big bonus to heavy attack damage, your charge up attack. So if you have a character that relies on that, then you want to run Mortefi with them, and they're both the best in the game right now. Since we don't actually have a Yinlin in the game, like she doesn't exist at all, these are your 2 best synergies, and luckily one of them you get for free from your daily login. So if you want to run a good synergy DPS, then you want to pick up Sanhua, and if you want to run one for heavy attacks, then you want to run Mortefi with it. Also keep in mind that Mortefi does benefit from multi-hit combos, so some characters will actually benefit more than others from having him as part of their team, and he's generally just a very easy pickup because when he pops his ultimate and he transitions back to the outro, he's able to add more fusion damage to whoever's attacking, so faster attacks can be really, really strong with him. But in general, these are going to be basically your 3 best synergies that you can have. But that doesn't stop here. There's actually more to the synergy tree here because there are going to be specific niche situations where other options are going to be coming available based on very specific synergies or specific combos that you can use to make some of these other main DPS on the left work even better. The next Resonator I had a hard time putting anywhere because she basically does everything. You could actually slot her in as your main DPS if you want. You could slot her in for synergy, and you can even slot her in for support if you play her right. And then is going to be Jianxin, one of the 5-star novice beginner banner characters that we have as part of that. She could probably, like DPS wise, she probably sits in B or C for damage output. It's harder to support her. In fact, for synergy, you almost have to run Aalto with her just because of the arrow synergy to give her even more damage, but you can run her damage if you want. You can run her in synergy. She works in like arrow teams if you want to put her together. She can even have a combo with Jiyan if you wanted to build it that way specifically, and you could even run her in support, as she does have support shields and some other things she can do for your team in very unique ways. She basically can fit in all of these roles. I would say she doesn't really perform any of these roles at a A level. She's basically B or C in almost all of them, but she's a great pickup because she can put she can be put into any party in any slot and still do just fine, especially if you're someone who's just starting out and you don't really like have everything optimized, or you don't care about meta. having her in your team or just having her in general is super useful because she's multi-role. She does everything in the game at about B or C level, which is super useful. And then next to her is going to be a free character, and I'm so glad there's more than one free character on this list, and that's going to be Yangyang. Yangyang can actually run in support or synergy. There's some arrow comps that can use Yangyang as synergy. In fact, you could run Jianxin as DPS and then run Yangyang as her synergy for combo there. You can run Yangyang as synergy for Jiyan as well, and she has a lot of really cool options. She's kind of like a synergy light version of Jiyan. She has vortex effects, she has okay damage and decent intro outro skills and combos with other resonators, but I think she's best fit in the synergy role. And again, you can run her support if you absolutely need to. And for the last in B tier for synergy, I'm actually going to put the Spectro Rover, because the time slowing for the outro intro skill for her, or for him, whatever your Rover is actually super useful, and there are some damage synergies that you can use from the Spectro Rover. So again, if you're in a pinch and you don't really have any options for synergy, you can actually just put your Rover either in main DPS or synergy, and it'll work pretty well. Though in synergy, I would use primarily Spectro just for that time slowing. Lastly, for C tier on synergy, I'm going to drop both Aalto and Fedora, man. Yuanwu. These two characters are like, basically they're kind of like a shadow of all the characters above them, and because there's already like two free characters above them, even one that you get for free from the daily login with Sanhua, I wouldn't really recommend running these unless you have a very specific comp. So for example, you can do electro combos with Yuanwu, and you can do arrow combos with Aalto. In fact, you can run, like I said, you can run Jianxin as DPS and run Aalto as your synergy. Even you can run Yangyang or Aalto, but Aalto is basically just a worse version of Mortefi in almost every single category, so I wouldn't really recommend running him unless you absolutely have to. And because there's other options that are easy to get, I wouldn't really recommend running either of these characters for synergy, but you certainly can if you really want to. Now let's wrap up with the last category, which is very small right now. We don't have a lot of options for the support role, and you could probably argue that this is the reason why you might want to invest in getting the character in S tier here, because she fits in every single team comp. She does support better than any other resonator in the game for quite a while, and that is going to be Verina. She is insanely good at support. She has buffs, she has damage increases as you get higher and higher in her sequencing. So you get like S4, S5, she gets in crazy amounts of bonuses and buffs, and she doesn't have to be on the field for very long. She can get increased healing when she does intro outro with other characters. She has a great ability that can also deal damage, and she also has an amazing heal. And there's also later on you can unlock like a cheat death mechanic for her as well, which is super useful. And like I mentioned, for characters like Danjin that constantly consume their HP and are a little on the squishier side, they do tend to want to run with Verina because they're going to get so much free healing from having that as part of their team. So Verina is a 5-star as part of the novice beginner banner. So if you're looking on who to spend it, like if you don't really care who you get in synergy or main DPS, or maybe you got lucky on your limited banner and you pulled Jiyan, maybe you want to be using your selection on Verina because she's just gonna, like, literally there isn't a single team comp in the entire game of Wuthering Waves in 1.0 that can't use Verina in the support role. She's just that ubiquitous, that awesome. And currently there's not really anyone in the game that holds a candle to her, so I'm actually going to skip over the A tier and go straight to the B tier with Bai Zhe. I think you actually get one copy of her for free once you progress far enough the story. She's not too hard to unlock in general, and you usually get one from her, and then getting her higher and higher is good. But she's probably the second best option for support aside from Verina. She does have good heals. She has some nice animations that you can use. Some of her attack chain combos can be super useful, and she actually has some really cool gameplay that is very unique compared to some of the other characters on this list. So you would basically be using Verina or Bai Zhe as the support character for most of these roles. In fact, if you're going to run the Glacio build with Lingyang as your DPS, Sanhua for the synergy, you usually will run Bai Zhe for the support, even over Verina, just to get that extra synergy in there, which is super useful. Then next to her, you can actually run Yangyang. She does have some support healing, and as someone just pointed out in chat, you can also run Rover Spectro as well. So if you get her ranked up enough, or get him ranked up enough, you can run them in there. But these are your core three. Like between these three, I would expect in your support slot, your third slot, one of these three resonators to be there in almost every single team in 1.0 until we start getting more options later down the line. And because there is one resonator missing from this list that I felt bad that I thought there was going to be more than one left off the list, but it's only one. There's one resonator that didn't even make the list, and I felt bad about it, and so I decided to put her on there because we may as well just complete the circuit, and that is going to be Yaoqi. She is kind of she's just very slow. She uses a broad blade. She doesn't have a lot of synergies. She doesn't really bring a lot to the table in general. However, she can scale with defense, and she does have shielding. So if you really, really wanted to, if you were kind of masochistic and you just wanted to have something different, you could run Yaoqi or Taoqi in your support role for the shielding, and she probably will have plenty of extra bonus gear. Like, one of the benefits of like Yuanwu and Taoqi are that they use gear that almost no one else uses, so you'll have plenty of extra gear for them and echoes for them to kind of build them up and make them stronger, because who's really going to be using what they have? But that is going to be the complete tier list for 1.0 as it stands right now in Wuthering Waves. And I'm just going to cut it there to keep it short because I could have gone a lot longer. If you want more like individual resonator guides or more detailed guides breaking down to their combos, rotations, and things like that, then let me know down in the comments, but that's all I got. If you found value in today's video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people, and don't forget to check out my other channels for other content and other stuff and other things.